Alright, so we are back and welcome to another Raid Shadow Legends video. And it's currently been 1 week since the changes to Hydra has been put into the game, and it's fair to say that most of the player base are unhappy with the current state of the Hydra as well as the mechanics that we now have to face. And in today's video, I do want to give my personal thoughts on the things that I've had to overcome in my personal teams that I've been running compared to post-rebalance, as well as seeing your feedback in the comment section below of how it's affected your teams. But we're going to be speaking about that a little bit later on. But the main topic is also, what are the best block buffs champions in the game to tackle the Hydra boss? Whether that be to stop the heads from placing buffs of their own, as well as stopping the head of mischief from stealing and spreading them, putting your team in a bad situation. And it's actually a follow-on from a series that I started where you may have seen the best provoke champions to lock down the head of decay. And I'm slowly going to go around to all of the mechanics, and maybe the head of torment will be next up for the best champions to counter that head. So if that does sound cool, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on those uploads, as I feel like now more than ever, players need to understand all of the mechanics because these heads are coming back quicker due to the HP bar, for example. But yeah, I guess in terms of the block buffs list, I have kind of forced myself to have the top 10 legendaries. So if I missed out on some of your favorites, forgive me. I had to make those harsh decisions, as well as the top 5 epics as well, and the only 2 mythicals that's currently in the game. So if you wasn't aware, I am a huge fan of everything Marvel, and I've got a really cool sponsor today in Marvel Strike Force, a dynamic squad-based RPG that allows players to assemble teams with their favorite characters from the Marvel universe to battle against threats like Doctor Doom and Apocalypse. And you can download now using my link in the description below or scanning the QR code on screen to get yourself the free character Agatha Harkness this month, as well as new players being able to unlock up to 17 characters, including Spider-Man, Deadpool, and Thor in their first month of playing. So in this game, you'll be recruiting your favorite heroes and villains from across the multiverse and power up those characters to take down game modes such as the campaign, Blitz, Arena, Alliance War, and even the Cosmic Crucible, where you go head to head against other players in a tournament. And when we speak about team synergy, it plays a major role in Marvel Strike Force. For example, these characters from the same factions, like the Avengers or the X-Men, usually have these unique effects to boost their teammates, so assembling a well-balanced squad is key to unlocking their full potential. So yeah, it's a really cool time to try out the game. Remember, you can download now by using my link in the description below or scanning the QR code on screen. And to celebrate the spooky season, players can redeem the promo code Halloween to get their free 100 shards for Zombie Iron Man, as well as 600k gold and 480 L2 training modules. So once again, thank you to Marvel Strike Force for sponsoring today's video, and let's get back into it. So this team here is the one that I chose to go with for the Nightmare difficulty since the rework, and I actually had to make loads of changes to my comp. For example, I had to drop my Missionarchy, as much as it was hard to do. I just felt like the damage that I was getting over time was more optimal with this variation, and it came down to needing more protection for my team. For example, when the reflect damage goes up, these Hydra mechanics we have to deal with on a more consistent basis. So if I don't get a block buffs out, reflect damage goes up, and one of my damage dealers, such as 4th Day Hammer, he's actually got a passive that's going to attack regardless. And if I lose him like 30 minutes into a run, there's no worse feeling than that, right? So I had to make that decision to get a reviver in there who's also bringing heals and continuous heals to cycle effects with the turn meter in terms of turn meter fills. And I've actually got my Lydia the Death Siren in here for drop defense and weaken, and I put her in a curse set to make sure we get some hex out on the team, which was the difference from 430 million from my first run without it, and now going to almost 500 million. But we did lose a champion, so I think we could push to maybe 530 to 540, depending on the rotation. But one thing that I also notice is that burst damage is more important than ever. And what do I mean by this? So if we just backpedal a little bit to where one of the decapitated heads were down. So it's getting these heads into these situations that they're very low HP, overcapping on their damage to add to our scores with your best damage dealers that you've got on your account. For example, I know that when I was on a stream with Saf on Discord, his team was using Legate Teox and Quintus, and they both have dominant A1s. So he'd kind of time these heads, get them down to like super low HP, then unleash the skills on time and making sure that you get the most damage possible. So that's something that I've been trying to work on with my teams, because usually I wouldn't really have to care. I'll just click auto, click the champions that I want here and there, and then towards the end of the run, I was dealing like 1.1 to 1.2 billion damage. Which is another thing to note, like my Hydra Clash score has dropped down significantly, and I'm sure that many of you guys are in the same boat as well. And one of the main things is, of course, the Hydra heads now have a HP bar, as you see. So the heads are coming back a lot quicker, and the Serpent's Will has 100% damage reduction. And there's actually times where, I'm not sure why this is even a thing, Raid, this needs to change. There should never be a situation where Serpent's Will is on more than 1 to 2 heads at any given time, because I've been encountering 4 heads, all with Serpent Will, literally at the same time. And it's like, what are you supposed to do in those situations apart from grab a coffee or check what time it is, right? Like, it's just crazy because there's no way to neutralize it like you can with the Poison Cloud effect, where if they're under a HP burn, at least you can still target them and inflict some damage, right? And not weak hit. But with the Serpent's Will at 100% damage reduction and dealing with it on multiple enemies, this is where a lot of our damage is getting tanked, as well as, of course, the HP bar on the heads. So it's about timing it, like how many heads do you want to come back at a certain time, and, you know, having the block buffs ready, which is the topic of today's video. And I know that loads of players are re-gearing their champions and stuff like Reflex or Merciless on their block buffs options, because let's just say Head of Torment's come back now, but let's just say that's Head of Suffering. We want to make sure, just like there, that we've got our block buffs available, and doing this on full auto is really hard to determine the situation that's going to occur, right? So for example, right here, we're going to see some nice damage against the heads, and 2 of them are going to come back. And because it was the same time, one has the Serpent's Will and one doesn't. But let's just say those situations where Head of Suffering comes back with the Head of Blight, and you've just used your block buffs to control other heads, such as the Head of Wrath or the Head of Decay, like I've done here. Well, you're now in a situation where we don't have it available, so let's just say Poison Cloud goes up, Head of Suffering takes an extra turn, or one of your champions gets devoured, and then that massive HP bar goes up for the more subsequent turns that they devour you. Is there even a way to get that champion back? Like right now, we had a good situation, but there was times where we never got it up, and then, you know, Reflect damage is up, my allies are dying, and champions such as Thor has no way to like hold back from it and target other champions, because his passive just enables anyway. So he was dying so many times, and without a reviver, my teams just wasn't as consistent as they once was, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to manage it, guys. I really don't. Like, of course, if you've got like enemy max HP or decreased buff duration effects from like Marius or Lady Mikage, there's some potentials there if you've got some of the most powerful teams for full auto. But because of the AI, that's just another topic on its own. But guys, there should be never a time where allies do ally attack against someone with Serpent's Will that has 100% damage reduction, or Poison Cloud where there's weak hits. Like, there's so many other times, like attack a decapitated head, you know, attack one that's not in those situations. Like, these things don't need to change like in 4 weeks or 6 months. Raid, if you're watching, those AI changes need to come now. Like, even champions such as Duchess Lilitu or my Senna, there's times where they're not under perfect veil, and right now, look at this. Why is she attacking the Head of Torment? Right? It's just silly, because now, right now, let's just say I needed a revive. She's gonna get True Fit, and boom. I'm just wasting so many turns, and it can lead to a failure of a run. So these are the kind of things that I've been trying to overcome, and manual is definitely the way that I recommend most players anyway to go, to try and optimize your damage, because they've not brought down the requirements of the Hydra class chest or even the personal rewards. So trying to get to that 1.2 billion is harder than ever. Like, for myself, I still managed to get to 3.3 billion clash points, which is around 50 to 60% less than I was currently doing, which I did kind of expect. It was a bigger drop than I expected for this first week, knowing that I have got my champions built very well for my team, for Hydra anyway. But yeah, those are just a few things that I had to overcome and think about. And I think revive abilities, decreased speed A1 champions such as Pharaoh the Barkhorn, and maybe even AoE increased speed. I know that many players are opting out for it because they want the Serpent's Will buff to expire quicker so you can get some more damage out there. But on the other hand, because we need to cycle our block buffs, you know, sometimes you rely on the decreased speed to make sure that you can even get those effects out on time. So it's a double-edged sword. But at least with these single target ones, if you are endgame, you know, being able to slow down the digested ones if you're not completely wiping them out, or certain heads where you know, you kind of want those block buffs to go out, it's definitely worth having at least a single target one in your team, in my opinion. But increased speed, turn meter fill, cycling your effects, definitely very optimal as well. So for this run here, we're just going to be cycling around here. As you can see, look at this situation here. Reflect damage. Thor Feyhammer's going to be wiping himself out. He actually had some reflect damage as well earlier, I believe, throughout the run as well. And, you know, this is where I need my revivers now. You know, we definitely need it. I'd love to have someone like Sulfurion. Like, I know that Saf, he's got a team where he doesn't even run block buffs, because what he's doing is using multiple reduced duration champions, and then he's using Sulfurion to counter the Poison Cloud, and he's just cycling his turn so quickly with enemy max HP and strong nukers that he doesn't actually need the block buffs, which is a cool take. But I definitely wouldn't run a team like that without someone like Sulfurion. We actually lost our Gallius Bloodcrest at around 820 turns, so we was down to 5 champions. This is where I said that my damage could have got a lot higher. So we just pause this here and go up. So 494 million damage dealt. And, you know, compared to my 1.1 to 1.2 billion to now 490 and having to really pay attention to what I'm doing, it's a big drop in damage. And I'm sure that many of you guys are in the same boat and potentially struggling to reach those points. But yeah, that was just a few things that I kind of noted, the things that I had to overcome. Overall, I did get 3.3 billion clash points overall, which was around 50 to 60% less than my traditional damage that I would do. And especially on Brutal, it was just a team that would usually perform to the turn limit was struggling halfway through the run, especially when I like to usually do auto on my Brutal and hard teams, but I usually manual my Nightmares. So, okay, let's just go straight into the block buffs options. The video is dragging on way much longer than I thought it would at this point. So, the first one's going to be Feral the Barkhorn, and there's many builds that people are changing nowadays with the current Hydra mechanics, right? And let's just go into the Sylvan Watchers. And with this champion, I like to build him in a protection set to coincide with the passive, right? Where you're getting 20% damage boost, as well as the extra bonus for the 2 buffs that he places with this A3. So definitely a really optimal build. I still currently use it. But now that the heads are coming back quicker, especially in these endgame teams or lower difficulties, you know, you may want to consider like Reflex or Merciless to reset those cooldowns, so you've got more time to place the block buffs more consistently, right? With this one here. As well as that, he is placing decreased accuracy to alleviate the amount of debuffs coming your way and increase resistance to kind of coincide with that. And then we got the perfect veil to counter the Head of Torment, as well as decreased speed on a single target ability. So if you're a player that's trying to make the Serpent Will expire, a single target decreased speed is actually very optimal to slow down the decapitated heads at least, or certain heads causing you problems. And you know, it's definitely a lot more dominant than it once was. So yeah, overall, Fear of the Barkhorn, honestly, probably number 1 in the game for me. Next up here, these ones are in no particular order, but we cannot mention Block Buffs without Warmaster Authorion from the High Elves faction. And it comes down to the increased attack, increased accuracy, and also an increased speed, granting an extra turn, and inflicting enemy max HP, which has become more dominant with the HP scaling of decapitated heads. He also brings block buffs and decreased attack to reduce the damage you take, and turn meter fills as well. As well as not triggering counterattacks and filling this champion's turn meter for each living enemy after the attack. And he's also got some self-sustain with increasing this champion's HP for each enemy killed, or Hydra heads decapitated as well, up to 50,000. So yeah, a very strong champion, probably one of my most wanted champions in the game. Next up here is going to be somebody everybody got for free. I'm not sure if he's still available for a promo code. I think he is from Monkey King, right? For new players. But it's Sun Wukong. And usually if it was just a block buffs, probably wouldn't have made the list in my opinion, because I feel like the champions that I've chosen as my top 10 are bringing more than just the block buffs. But it's also the before attacking, stealing all buffs from all enemies, as well as the block buffs on a 3-turn cooldown. So let's just say Head of Wrath pops off, for instance, or, you know, you just don't manage to cycle the block buffs on time. Being able to steal those can just get you back into a good situation and carry on your runs. as well as just some good damage around the board as well, and self-reviving when you need it. So yeah, a simple but effective champion. I use him in my hard team currently, and he puts in a really good job. So next up here is actually going to be one of the most underrated champions in the game in Archbishop Pinthroy. And it comes down to the effectiveness on this A2, which places an increased accuracy, allowing you to reach the stats that you may need, as well as placing a heal reduction, which we don't care about. But it's the block buffs here for 2 turns on a 3-turn cooldown. So just looking at this as increased accuracy and block buffs, that's actually very nice. As well as bringing some support for your team with healing allies by 30% of their max HP, an increased defense, and also a shield buff as well if 4 or more allies are alive, equal to 30% of their max HP. So this is nice, block buffs coming in, and then transferring random debuffs as well and stealing them, such as the increased attack from Wrath. And then removing decreased defense and weakened debuffs from this champion at the start of the turn. So yeah, definitely a champion to consider. A lot of players are finding value in him in game, but it's not somebody that I see very often, which is a bit weird to me. We're going to be going into the Void Legendary next, from the Undead Hordes, I believe. Oh my gosh, this is so terrible, YST. He's an orc, right? There he is. The Supreme Variation of Gallic. He doesn't want to show himself. He's too powerful for it. Too cool for Hydra. So with this ability of the Unreasoning Outburst, he attacks all enemies with an extra chance to inflict a critical hit, but also has a chance of placing a HP burn and a block buffs debuffs for 2 turns, as well as a decreased speed on targets of higher turn meter than 50%. So this is nice, right? HP burn is something we really like, as well as the block buffs. He then has a 4-time at random hitter and self-amplifying with increased attack, and each has a chance of inflicting critical hits similar to the A3. And then each hit also has a chance of instantly activating those burns and then decreasing the duration of those HP burns by 1 turn. Fills the champion's turn meter by 30% as well if 3 or more HP burns activate. So a way to cycle round to get around those block buffs again, right? And then also a chance of increasing the duration on the A1. And then whenever this champion receives these effects, instantly removes them and grants an extra turn on a 4-turn cooldown. So yeah, a very powerful champion. I know that Scratch is a huge fan of him from the teams that I've seen him use in the past, and definitely one to watch out for. So this is a champion I actually pulled recently. I didn't go for the fusion, I fully regretted it, and I pulled him during the Prism event that we most recently had. And it's Mighty Uko, Hakuna Matata, Pumbaa. Here he is. And once again, these revived champions have become a lot more viable with the changes because, you know, you're countering more mechanics than you would usually, and sometimes you just get wiped later on into the run. So he actually revives them and also places an increased speed, even if there's no dead allies. As well as attacking all enemies and removing up to 2 random buffs from the target, which is actually very powerful in the Hydra. And then places block buffs and decreased accuracy if they have no buffs after the attack. So unless someone like Head of Mischief is stealing and spreading, which obviously you want to neutralize, there's not really a ton of buffs that the heads place on them with just normal skills. So this will be very consistent throughout the run, as well as a decreased attack A1, and then a chance of stealing buffs as well from random enemies. So yeah, overall, great speed aura, great champion, and somebody that I think might replace my son Wukong. I'll have to wait and see, but he's definitely going into one of my Hydra teams in the foreseeable future. I might ranking up throughout CVC. So this next one here, I was like, is he going to make my top 10 list? I wasn't too sure, but I think he does make it, just because I've seen him in Trunda teams and other teams out there. But at the same time, he punishes your teams, right, by placing poison debuffs for 3 turns. These debuffs cannot be resisted or blocked, but he does place a block buffs on a 3-turn cooldown with this ability. He also has this passive where allies under poisons inflict more damage for each poisons on them, stacking up to 30%, right? So whether that be his own poisons or also the Head of Blight, if you don't resist the effects, he's just enhancing your damage of your team over the run, right? So if you've got the survivability, or if you're just using it in Trunda teams, I've definitely seen him perform very well. And then removes all debuffs except poisons from an ally and heals them as well. And then just some continuous heal stuffs as well to coincide with champions such as Senna and Amberheart. So yeah, I think he deserves the top 10 list. Let me know if you disagree with that one. But I was definitely on the boat compared to other options. Next up here is another champion that I use for the brutal difficulty from the Shadowkin. And it's Jing1. Who remembers the video where I said his name 5,000 times live on stream and then he actually got a buff twice, right? But very similar to the Mighty Uko, because he's removing all buffs. This is something that we want to see, as well as decreased accuracy and decreased crit damage, and placing a strengthen for some protection here. And then on a 3-turn cooldown once booked, he's placing a block buffs and increasing the duration of those debuffs by 1 turn. So this is just a great way to keep those debuffs active, right? And then as well as placing it on a good cooldown. He also transfers debuffs from this champion to a target, and then he's immune to certain crowd control effects and removes them from allies as well. So let's just say the Head of Wrath goes for a provoke, you can cleanse those off and just keep you in your rotation. So that's one really underrated part of Jing1 that I think gets overlooked. Next up here is going to be a 2 Hanorok, and it was between 2 champions for this one, in my opinion. And it was going to be Loki or 2 Hanorok, and I'll explain why. So if we just go into 2 Hanorok, where's she from? She's a barbarian. What are you doing, YST? I'm terrible with these factions, guys. There we go. And it's the combination of increased defense and increased speed, 2 crucial things to bring into Hydra, as well as the decreased attack and the block buffs, and applying a debuff spread effect, taking 2 random debuffs and placing them on all enemies. So it's something that I used to use. It is a little bit nifty if there's crazy debuffs on the enemies. Sometimes you don't spread the ones that you want to, right? But still performs very well. As well as a decreased speed A1, similar to the Pharaoh the Barkhorn, and cleansing these debuffs to counter the Head of Torment, which is very important. So yeah, bring in a lot of effects for your team, and the reason why I put her above Loki is the conditionality of it. Like, don't get me wrong, if you're progressing, you don't have better options, Loki can perform on manual. However, because of the lack of perfect Veil options in the game, like there's only one reliable epic one being Rector Draft, and the other ones being legendaries, right? Such as Glaikad and Duchess Lilitu, or Pharaoh the Barkhorn for instance, but he places the block buff, so there's no point. But the reason for him is he actually needs to be under Veil or Perfect Veil to apply that debuff spread effect, right? So a chance of placing a block buff on a single target, which will occur anyway, and then if he's under the Veil, we'll debuff spread them. So I don't really like that part because he's not self-perfect veiling because it's a this or that placement with this ability, which is cool in hindsight, but doesn't interact on auto the way that I would like it. Also has a chance of stealing buffs as well, and a turn meter fill and an increased attack, which is nice, and increasing the duration of debuffs. But overall, I think 2 Hanorok takes it, in my opinion, for the debuff spread champion. Last on this list for my top 10 is going to be the Packmaster, and I know that the taunt actually got changed, right? It no longer stops the devouring of the champions. And here he is, the Packmaster. And apart from the Hound stuff, which, I'm not even interested in anymore, to be fair. But aside that, he does have turn meter fills, which is valuable. 100% chance to place block buffs, so you don't have to worry about the affinity disadvantage. As well as a passive which places hexes on enemies on the attackers. Also, if you build him in a curse set, you could place it on an enemy, and then you enhance this 20% more damage for allies such as, Legate Teox or Quintus, for example. Also removes all debuffs from this champion and heals them by 50%, and then places a shield on himself. And you can still use these extra buffs to play as a mischief tank, right? And then an A1 decreased defense. So yeah, maybe he got nerfed in terms of the taunt, but still a very effective champion to just cycle your team, place block buffs, and then enhance their damage when you get the hex out. So yeah, that was it for my top 10 legendaries. Let me know which ones you would have changed, in your personal opinion. But be sure to check out the website for a full list of block buffs options, because at the end of the day, block buffs is block buffs. Any champion that places it as a good chance is definitely viable to go into your Hydra teams. But I wanted to force myself into those harsh decisions there. So there's currently 2 mythical champions that's currently in the game that can place the block buffs. And one is Crixia, where she removes buffs from enemies and also increases the skill cooldowns. On this one here, places a block buffs and a decreased resistance. So if you just want to use it for this effect, could be very valuable. But right here, you can't increase the cooldowns of the Hydra heads, but the buff removal is nice, right? And then obviously you could switch the forms potentially, reset the cooldowns and stuff. So definitely a viable strategy, but maybe not somebody that I would personally use. But decreased resistance is very powerful with the buff removals and turn meter fills. So yeah, she definitely is a top tier one for sure. And then also there is Lazarius, who I'd put as the number 1 in terms of the two. And it all comes down to the block debuffs on all allies, and also decreasing the duration of all buffs on all enemies, which is actually very powerful, as well as placing a block buff. So let's just say the block debuffs get stolen and spread it onto all the heads. There's a way to decrease that duration to make sure that the block buff still goes up. He also has the turn meter fill and decreasing the turn meter and increase attack and strengthen on all allies to enhance your damage. And if you do want to switch forms, you can get some nice damage out of him as well as placing some perfect veils on him at the start of this champion's turn to counter the Head of Torment, right? And then we got a speed aura by 25%, which is powerful. So okay, let's get into the top 5 epics. This one might be a bit controversial, but number 1 for me is Ugo. This was not controversial, I think, when it gets around to the other ones. And it's going to be because block buffs and decreased defense, right, synergizes very well with your weakened champions, such as Eostra Dreamsong. We got a Leech on this A1 to heal by the damage inflicted, as well as cleansing the heal reduction from Head of Decay and random debuffs and healing them by 20% of this champion's max HP with a quirky revival if she's the last one alive. So yeah, a simple but effective champion that many players get a lot of value out of, right? Next up here is going to be Ostrox, and I think this is the second favorite one for me, and it goes above Umbral Enchantress, and I don't think there's any videos on YouTube talking about this champion, and I don't know why. And the reason for it is, where is he? Like, he's void affinity, so you don't have to worry about the affinity disadvantages, but he places a block buff for 3 turns on a 3-turn cooldown. This is full uptime, guys. So let's just say there's times where, you get the block buffs up, there's someone like Head of Suffering that takes an extra turn. It ensures that there's still another block buffs available, so you don't feel like you have to immediately place the block buffs, so you can wait for the other heads to come back and still ensure that you can get that out. So I think because of the duration and the affinity, he's a top tier option. You build him in a curse set for some hex out there as well. It's going to be really cool. He also has a way of transferring random debuffs from this champion to an enemy, as well as healing the lowest HP target by 10%, and then removes random debuff from allies and places increased accuracy. So let's just say, once again, the provokes from Head of Wrath, you can take those off, as well as placing increased accuracy to place your effects a lot easier when you're progressing. And then also has a chance of sending debuffs back to the attackers with a 20% chance. So let's just say Head of Torment's trying to fear him, there's a chance that that won't happen at all. So yeah, overall, really good champion that came into the game, simple but effective, and has so many different ways you can build him, such as Provoke or the Curse set. Next up here is going to be Illusinia from the High Elves faction. Cornelia's auntie, where is she? There she is. And the reason for it is, before attacking has a chance of removing any block debuffs, like we mentioned with the Lazarius, right? If that's kind of stolen and spread, you want a way to counter that, so then you can place the block buffs. But the one thing is, with the Sniper Mastery, it's only an 85% chance, right? Which is still pretty consistent on a 3-turn cooldown, but it's just one thing to note. As well as placing a Strengthen and a Shield on allies, like Forms of Protection, block buffs, removing block debuffs, and stealing buffs. It's a really cool synergy for an epic champion, as well as healing herself when shields are broken from the Shield of Arabia. So yeah, really nice champion to consider. And then we got Nub Raids next from the Sacred Order. And where is he? Mr. Nubby. I think he's coming back from Japan soon, right? So he also has a 80% chance to place a block buffs, but once again, he is not very tanky, so ensuring that he can stay alive is key when putting him into your teams. We then have this decreased defense and decreased speed, and one of the most powerful A1s in the game, which have become way more dominant when you're trying to kill those decapitated heads. So let's just say they get down to 5% HP, you go in with an ally attack, you take them down, and boom, he's going to get a lot of value from that A1, especially if they've got debuffs, right? So yeah, FedEx for me makes the list for top 5. And then the last one was Umbral Enchantress, and I don't know what I feel about this champion. I know a lot of players like her, but she's just a block buffs. This is where I said Ostrox is better, because she locks herself out when you use the Provoke. I guess it's cool for those bad situations where maybe your Provoke champion gets 3% resisted or weak hits. It's a nice backup. But, having to sit there for 5 turns with block active skills that cannot be removed, it's just, I personally wouldn't want to be dealing with this. So, but just for the block buffs alone, Void Affinity, I'm still a pretty cool champion. So I did have one rare to put on the list, and it's actually from the Undead Hordes, right? On the Undead Hordes? No. Where is Abyssal from? He's a Skinwalker, right? I'm going to be going through all these factions and it's just going to be wrong. No, that's Lamabur. Where is Abyssal from? Lizardman? Oh man, I am so bad at this one. Surely you... Wait. No, he was undead. I'm sure he was a demon spawn. Yeah, where is he? I believe he's in here. There he is, the Spirit Affinity dude. Now, he heals all allies by 15%, increased defense and increased attack, but he has an AOE block buffs on the A1 at a... what was that? 25% chance? 30% chance? You know, if you're going in with ally attacks, it's not the greatest of chances, but for a rare champion, he is bringing in support and some heals and a block buff on the A1, which opens the opportunity for those provoke or curse sets. So, could be a nice backup option as well to consider when you're hitting like the normal difficulty. Yeah, I guess on that note, that is going to be all for today's video, guys. If you did find it enjoyable, be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and let me know which block buffs options do you value the most on your account in 2024. And I'll see you all on a video soon. Peace.